Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am back. I didn't stream about this yesterday because I wanted some of the stuff to sort of settle in a little bit when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards of the Coast, the OGL versus literally everybody else. And that's how that is how it seems to be shaping up. And I love how I planned this and then forgot to actually grab myself the stupid document that I wanted to talk about in the first place. So I don't know how. As somebody who talks about PR, and I'm gonna focus on that a little bit more on this one in particular because it is just me. Um, it's a little bit more where my specialty lies. The panel last stream was fantastic, and I absolutely thank you to everyone who has who showed up for that, who brought their opinions, who had things to say, because I think a lot of people have a lot of things to say, and I do not begrudge them. I am one of those people, and there's a lot of people who are stuck in the middle, and everybody's frustrated, and everybody's mad at everybody else, and I do not blame anybody for being mad at everybody else. You are absolutely in the right to be angry and frustrated. Let's get chat up on the screen. There we go. Cool. You guys are there. Fantastic. It did start a little bit early. And in doing so, I realized I accidentally forgot to open half the crap that I wanted to talk about today. So I'm going to be coming at this from a little bit of a PR standpoint because I think everybody agrees that this leak, whether you agree with it being leaked on purpose, whether you think it was leaked by accident, whether like whatever your opinion is about that situation, there is something to be said about how it's been received and how the miscommunication at at best, again I'm calling it miscommunication, at best in this case is basically screwing Wizards in a way that it, more so than the actual content of the OGL itself. Now, we talked about this during the panel, that the OGL is not illegal. There's nothing in there that is even that weird or strange nor bizarre from like a company protecting its IP standpoint. But I think what's getting people really, really confused, and I think what Wizards could do to, help themselves in this situation is actually clarify what is their IP, what is copyrighted, and what is trademarked, what do they actually own, and what does this affect. Because the thing is that saying things like intellectual property or saying like utilizing legal jargon can confuse people a lot because most people, myself included, are not legal experts. And this has been confusing legal experts. So, for anybody who didn't see, Legal Eagle did come out and make a video about it, and bless his heart, he said the exact same shit we were saying during the last live stream. And I do think that there is confusion about what exactly it is that Wizards owns and why this OGL comes and feels like an overreach because they think they own more than they do. And there was a point that was really made last time about how Wizards doesn't own the experience of playing Dungeons and Dragons. Wizards doesn't even know the rules to Dungeons and Dragons because that's not how gaming licenses work. And so I'm going to pull some of this up so you guys can take a look. The old saying goes, if you communicate poorly, you're going to have a bad time. Yes, exactly. I absolutely, if you have not seen Legal Eagle's video, I absolutely recommend watching it. I'm going to put it in the link. I'll put a link in the description down below so you can go and check that out. It's not terribly long. It's very clear. It's very concise. And it's just like, nice. I like it. I am a fan of it. So I want to just show you guys real quick. This little goober right here. This is the American Bar Association website. So as much as this is a global problem in some cases, where I'm gonna specify looking at this because this OLG does seem to be mostly a problem for, like, it seems to be very American central, so I am gonna focus on that a little bit. Oh, I brought myself rum for this. I felt like I needed it. So, this is about board game and intellectual property law, as you can see. And it's got like when it was published, 2015, yada yada yada, copyright holders, blah 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 blah, board games and how board games function from a. I like how I'm looking at you guys in chat, and the thing is over here, but it's right beside me right here. So, pardon the confusion of which direction I'm actually looking in. Chess is a good example. Monopoly, Scrabble, Chutes and Ladders are the ones that they describe here. Oh, Candyland. More complex strategic games have been generally relegated to hobbyist and niche gamers, such as war games, so that would include like Risk, who enact historical or fictional battles using cardboard chits or miniature figures on a map. In recent years, there has been a rising tide of new board games being developed, marketed, sold, and played around the world. In 2013, board games associated for more than 1.8 billion, accounted for 1.8 billion in sales in the United States out of a 22 billion domestic toy market. So board games take up a lot. We're talking like your Settlers of Catan. We're talking about like your ones that you connect all the trains with. I've forgotten the name of. You got your Risks, you got your Monopoly. Clue is another good example. Sales figures dwarf the size of the video game industry, are respectable, yada yada yada. That's fine. We acknowledge that board games exist and they're fun and good and they make lots of money. This is what I want to get to. To discuss copyright in board games, we must look back to an 1879 Supreme Court case, ironically having nothing to do with games, in Baker versus Selden. And Legal Eagle talks about Baker versus Selden in his video. This is actually the source he was using. I was reading this yesterday, and like seeing it pop up in his video. I was like, hey, that was the thing. The plaintiff had developed a new model of bookkeeping and published a book containing an introduction and explanation of the method and some examples that consisted mostly of blank bookkeeping forms. His book met with little success, but when another publisher began successfully selling a book containing very similar forms, he window filed a copyright infringement suit. The Supreme Court held that although the book was subject to copyright, the bookkeeping method, and that's the important part. Hello, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. And this is the important part, the method itself. So when applying this to like D&D, what is the method? And D&D, as I hope the majority of people know, uses the Roll20 system. It uses a 20-sided dice. You cannot copyright or trademark a 20-sided dice. The only thing that you can copyright or trademark would be the Dungeons and Dragons logo on a 20-sided dice. So the hat that I'm wearing that was sent to me from my Amazon wish list, what it's got on here, it's got a D20 on it with a 1, and it says, well, fuck. Wizards cannot copyright this. Someone else might be able to, the maker of the hat would, but Wizards can't touch this. This is not a Wizards hat. It's not their IP is not on this hat. They don't own the D20. You can't. You can't copyright nor trademark just the D20. Right? So, excuse me. Bookkeeping method itself was not a suitable subject of copyright, and because the form were merely implemented for performing a method, they are not copyrightable subject matter. The justice wrote, the overseeing judge at the Supreme Court said, quote, whilst no one has a right to print or publish his book or any material part thereof as a book intended to convey instructions in the art, any person may practice and use the art itself which he has described and illustrated therein. Ellipses. The copyright of a book on bookkeeping cannot secure the exclusive right to make, sell, and use account books prepared upon the plan set forth in such a book. So what does that mean? Well, I have these handy-dandy, lovely Wizards, Dungeons and Dragons books right here. So let's take two. Let's take our player's handbook. And take our player's handbook right here. Lovely D&D book. It has the D&D logo on it, right? It's Wizards official. It says player's handbook on it. It's got the Dungeons and Dragons thing. Everything a player needs to create heroic characters in a world greatest role-playing game. Yeah, Arm your adventure. Got that shit on the back. And when I open this up, right here, we've got credits in the front. We've got the contents, and we've got this preface, right? Lovely. Fantastic. So, how much of this book is copyrighted material? And the answer is it's fuzzy at the end of the day, because there are things that you can argue in court and things that you would go back and forth on and argue in court. And that's the thing that this OGL comes down to, is there was a level of security that people who were making content, official or not, for Wizards of the Coast were protected by that agreement. However, if you are making content that is compatible with this book, and you say, this, whatever I'm building, you can play it in this system, Wizards can't own a degree of the system. They can't own strength. They can't own con. They might be able to own the artistic presentation, right? TLDR, you can't copyright a D20 check, where you roll a 20-sided dice and add or subtract modifiers and compare against the target. Exactly. You cannot own these things. They do not own the Dungeons and Dragons. They do not own the D20 system. They don't even own degrees of how you decide your stats. They can't own roll 4d6 or roll 3d6 and that's your number, and then do some math and here's a modifier. These are methods. That would be the method part, right? Now, that does not mean that Wizards isn't going to utilize this OGL to try to sue people into oblivion and bully them with money to bully out competition. Corporations aren't entirely known to not do that kind of thing. And that's, I think, is what a lot of people are afraid of, right? They're afraid of, like, well, if I make D&D, quote-unquote, adjacent work, my work, because it's compatible with Dungeons & Dragons and because it uses that D20 system, that Wizards is going to come after me. Wizards doesn't own the D20 system. Period. End of sentence. So if you were to take, and I'd love to see somebody do this, and I've been doing this in the background. I've been going through and looking to see what is the system and what is fluff. Calling something strength, con, dex, and laying it out in a stat block is fluff. That's fluff. What isn't fluff is the actual number crunching, right? You can call something whatever you want. So it's a matter of removing whatever fluff is associated, and there are gray areas. Spells are kind of weird, because you can't own a fireball. You can't copyright fireball. Not at least as described as a ball of fire that explodes and hurts people. You can't, you're not going to be able to copyright that. But you might be able to copyright something more specific, to say that this is my artistic rendition of a fireball that does this amount of damage and does this thing and roll these dice to da-da-da-da-da. That starts getting gray, because although it is mechanics, the descriptor is there. But all you have to do is change your description. So instead of playing Dungeons and Dragons, we all just change what we're calling it and say, hey, we're all playing Hookers and Blow. Great, we're all playing Hookers and Blow, and you can still use the same system. You can use their books, you can use whatever supplement material you're making, because the supplement material isn't copyrighted. Yeah, Melf's Acid Arrow is a good example. Take Melf's out, call it Acid Arrow. Right? Do you see what I'm getting at? And as much as I like seeing what Pathfinder is doing and what their intention is, in my opinion, what the community needs to do, or what needs to happen, is that we just need to stop calling the game we're all playing Dungeons and Dragons. Because we're not all playing Dungeons and Dragons anyway. Just pick some other name. We're playing a nondescript tabletop role-playing game. So, like, when it comes to Critical Role in Dimension 20, They're playing in their own world anyway. If you've used this as a bait, like, they don't own Thor, they don't own Bahamut. They might own a specific description of Bahamut, but that doesn't stop you from using Bahamut or Asmodeus, or saying, hey, there's X number of layers to hell and there's a hierarchy of devils that are in charge of each layer. They can't own that. What they can own is specific characters within that world. So you start calling Mephistopheles and you just start calling him Fisty, which is what my group did, because we didn't have any respect for that man. You're in the clear. Right? So it's a matter of naming conventions at that point, right? Landon says in the chat, one problem with Wizards of the Coast is that they will try to own stuff that they don't have the rights to own, in my opinion. Absolutely. And this is part of the PR problem that they're running into. They want people to think that they own things they don't, so they can monopolize something that they do not actually own. And I think this is the best thing to come out of this OGL. The best thing that has come out of this OGL is people being like, hey, wait a minute, maybe the first OGL wasn't important in the first place, because whatever we're playing, I don't need the D&D logo. I don't need the D&D. Wizards brand doesn't do dick for me in my homebrew, because it's my homebrew. Your homebrew being compatible with Dungeons and Dragons doesn't mean Dungeons and Dragons owns it, because Dungeons and Dragons doesn't own the rules in the first place. Let's continue. I'm sorry, I'll calm down. Sorry. Yeah, Mephistopheles can come for my booty. I'd prefer if Grazitz came for my booty, let's be real. Okay. The principle laid down in Baker v. Selden was later codified in the Copyright Act of 1976, which says clearly, quote, in no case does copyright protection for an original work of authorship extend to any idea, procedure, process, system, method of operation, concept, principle, or discovery, regardless of the form in which it is described, explained, illustrated, or embodied in such work. Okay, thus, the idea-expression dichotomy is that is fundamental to copyright can be traced back to Baker v. Selden. Therefore, the systems or processes that make up the core of a game, generally referred to as the game mechanics, are not subject to copyright. Even though the written rules, game board, card artwork, and other elements often referred to as the theme of the game may be. So they might own this particular description of a displacer beast, and they might own the name displacer beast. But if you say cat with a tentacle on its back, you can't own that. And as long as it has specific abilities or not. And that's where you get in that gray area. If you say displacer beast has this stat layout, has this description, lives in this kind of environment, has these abilities, is called a displacer beast, that would be something that Wizards could claim copyright on. However, if you say a cat with tentacle on his back that's really strong and is going to fuck you up with a tentacle attack, they can't own that. And I think the major concern is that you could be sued. And at the end of the day, anybody can really file a lawsuit. There are arguments around frivolous lawsuits. And I think that's what a lot of people in the community are afraid of. They're afraid that if they make adjacent stuff off of stuff that Wizards doesn't even actually own in the first place, that Wizards is just going to bully them with money. Which is kind of what they were already doing. Trademark is different. And trademark is what I'm talking about with, like, the D&D logo and stuff like that. And us colloquial... So this is the thing. This is something that Google, if you all remember, Google was concerned about, right? So, like, Google became a verb. To Google something, you can't own a verb. And so Google, to avoid that, and to avoid that conundrum where they would no longer own a trademark to Google, changed the company name to ABC. because suddenly they wouldn't have any control over their IP anymore because Google became too popularized of terminology, right? And became a word. So instead of Critical Role saying, hey, we're a bunch of nudity-ass voice actors coming to play we're like coming around to play Dungeons and Dragons. We play Dungeons and Dragons! They just have to change Dungeons and Dragons to whatever thing they're doing. Because because they're playing in a world with rules that are compatible with Dungeons and Dragons doesn't inherently mean it's owned by Wizards. That's the back and forth. Right? And so, is Wizards gonna sue people? I don't fucking know. I don't work for Wizards. I don't know what they're doing. This is chaos. And all they've done by having things released in this way and reaching in the way that they are is cause discontent amongst the community in general, as well as something that everybody thought they were stable in, they don't feel like they're stable anymore. So you have people like, I just watched a video, like a quick 4-minute video from Outlaw. And Outlaw was like, I'm going to stop making shorts because I can't under the new OGL, or at least even if you could, there's too much risk involved there. And I'm paraphrasing and adding in a little bit. It wasn't specifically what he said, but the OGL is meaning that somebody who makes skit comedy, that's what Outlaw does, skit comedy based on broken things within Wizards' presentation of the D20 system is at risk as far as he's concerned. Now, there's a difference between a literal risk and a figurative risk, right? He might feel like he is more at risk than he actually is, but that uncertainty is what is establishing that fear. What does Wizards own? What doesn't Wizards own? And what is in that gray area? I imagine the monster manual is going to be the thing that is going to be the most difficult to argue one way or another, because the monster manual has things like genies. You can't own like a Quetzalcoatl or dinosaurs. Like, Wizards doesn't own arthropods. That's not how that works. They can't own arthropods. You can't own a cat or a bear or a rat or a swarm of rats. You can't even own a swarm of rats. So what do they own in the monster manual and what do they not own in the monster manual? Right? You can't own a devil. You can't copyright a demon. You can't even copyright an angel. You can't even copyright a god. Let alone if you're pulling from other pieces of lore. Like, good luck getting copyright on a gooey cube that eats people. Mimics are a good example. Wizards doesn't own mimics. Mimics have been around for fucking ever. They might be able to argue a specific amount of artistic representation of a mimic, but good luck, because you're not going to be doing it with a chest. Like, it's not going to be the mimic chest. So what type of mimic would it be? You'd have to invent an entirely different, like, type of mimic, and even then you would be struggling with something like that. But something like the Displacer Beast or the Intellect Devourer? Maybe. Can't own a dragon, that's for fucking sure. Good luck copywriting a dragon. Good luck even copywriting a dungeon. Now, you might be able to... Because here's the other thing. I've got another book here. Descent into Avernus. How much of this book does Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards own? And Hasbro, I guess. Well, they would own Zariel. Zariel is a character that has a specific personality and a storyline and stat block, etc., etc. Zariel is recognizable. Zariel is their character, and you can own a copyright to a character. Like, you can't go and make Drist and be like, I called him Bist, he's totally mine, original OC, please don't steal. But Can you own hell? Can you own that there are devil lords in a place called hell that is divvied up by layers? Nope. Nope. Or circles? Or rings? Or plateaus, you could call it. There's so many terms you could use. However, if you were to run this game, this IP, Descent into Avernus, if you were to run this specific module, the module they can own, right? But if you made a module that is compatible and maybe pulls inspiration from Descent into Avernus, or you were to run a D&D campaign that is streamed, that spends time in the layers of hell, instead of calling, I mean, I don't even know if they could copyright the 9 hells, but all you have to do is change the names of the demons, or the devils. Sorry, please forgive me, I have sinned. Right? Chat, in my opinion, unless the D&D community makes Wizard of the Coast not critical to the community, Wizard of the Coast will continue to try and position itself as a controlling authority of D&D. Yes. Okay, so, and this is the thing that I think is the important takeaway from the OGL, is that as a community, we need to pick apart the game Dungeons and Dragons, as we've been colloquially calling it, and differentiating what is the game and what is Wizards' version or Wizards' presentation. Because the presentation is what Wizards does actually own. That is their IP. That is what they can do whatever they want with. And not that they shouldn't be able to do that. They can absolutely do that thing. That's totally fine. It's important to have copyright laws and have people owning IPs and such. However, the game, what is the system of Dungeons and Dragons, and that Dungeons and Dragons uses that is free for everybody. So if I have a pack of 52 cards, what games can I play? Well, all of them. I can play Uno. I can play Uno with a pack of 52 cards, and Uno can't fucking stop me. Why would that'd be ridiculous? But if I want to play Uno and I want the aesthetic and style of Uno, I can go and buy Uno cards. Right? So if I want to play this D20 system, I can play this D20 system. I don't need any of these books. And so what is the system? Right? Wasn't it Dante's Inferno, which had rings in hell? Yeah, Dante's Inferno had the God, yeah, were they called rings? I think that you're right. Oh, God. So here's one of the parts that you get, like Grandma calling all consoles Nintendo. Yes, RJ, you're absolutely correct. Yes, like all consoles are Nintendo. No, right? And so, like, what does Nintendo own and what doesn't Nintendo own? Right? You don't own people. Wizards does not own your adventure. Wizard doesn't own your homebrew rules or your homebrew monsters just because they are compatible with their system. Now, you might have to change your wording and your presentation and how you kind of talk about this, but it doesn't, we all collectively as a community need to stop calling it Dungeons and Dragons, because it's realistically not, right? Now, if we say Dungeons and Dragons compatible, sure, that works. If you say Dungeons and Dragons adjacent, use Dungeons and Dragons as a descriptor, like, right? But if you were to say, well, we're playing a Roll20 tabletop RPG. Yeah, it's a lot longer, and maybe we can find like a more catchy way of phrasing it that nobody actually owns. And yes, dilute the trademark. What is it that Wizards actually legally owns? Now, again, this is not to say that people aren't going to get sued or that Wizards isn't going to go after anybody, because again, they are a large company with a lot of lawyers that may in the future, maybe they're not doing it now, maybe they won't do it in the future, I don't know, but it's within their capability to go out and sue people who are playing or selling adjacent material. And they can just try and attempt to use money to bully out and make a monopoly for themselves. Thanks, Hasbro. Hasbro? Whatever. I always say their name wrong. So, I think there's a gray area here, though. That's a little bit difficult. That's probably going to be the most difficult part. What is a monk? What is a fighter? What is a wizard? Are they characters of Wizards of the Coast that they own? Or are they representative of an archetype from a system used to describe the function of that system? Because if they're not I would personally argue that if it doesn't have a name, it's not a character. That's not true. This is the way I would describe it. You can't argue that legally. That's not going to fly. It might be part of your legal argumentation, but that's not going to necessarily work. So when you have character classes, how much can you own of a barbarian and the system by which a barbarian functions? How much of a druid can you own? How much can you own of a fireball? Because you can't own the spell slot system. That's a system of the game. They don't own spell slots. So, what do they and do they not own? And I really do want to push this home. What does Wizards own? And what doesn't Wizards own? Because that is probably the biggest question that has to be answered by the community. And what does the community want? I mean, realistically, at the end of the day, depending on how colloquially Dungeons and Dragons is used, it loses all meaning and it just becomes representative of the D20 system, and in which case Wizards loses that copyright or that trademark. Because you can't own a verb. Right? You can't own the word building. You can't own the verb Google. That's why they changed their name. So you can dilute these things to a degree of into non-existence. And so the question becomes like, is that what the community wants to do, or does the community just want to shift away from calling everything that they're playing to Dungeons and Dragons? Now, if you look, if you're on Twitch, you look down below, the tag is Dungeons and Dragons. So that becomes a problem, right? That becomes a problem if you're a streamer and you're using the Dungeons and Dragons tag, because that tag is their trademark. But how does that apply to things like Five Nights at Freddy's? How does that apply to things like I'm playing a playthrough of Pokemon? So I'm arguably advertising myself using the IP of another company. And where does that fall? Yeah, Aries says, clearly J.R.R. Tolkien owns this Dungeons and Elves mumbo jumbo, right? Wizards are also popular in literature, so you can't, but can you own a specific representation or a specific, as you make that, but what it does is it forces Wizards into a more narrow and more narrow and more narrow box, and they own less and less and less and less as you start to define these things. And some of these things are probably going to have to be fought out in court. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't take legal advice from people on the internet. Don't even take legal advice from Legal Eagle. Don't take legal advice from anybody on the internet. Get a lawyer. Take legal advice from the lawyer that you're paying to be on your side. Landon says, there's a question here that says, where do the terms D&D or D&D fall? Does anyone own or claim the rights to those terms? So from my understanding, D&D as it is represented is a trademark of Wizards, because it the same way Monopoly is a phrase and term that is owned in that capacity. So the same way that I was talking about Fireball, the alcohol Fireball is trademarked, right? But it is trademarked within the confines of, it is cinnamon whiskey, uses this iconography that it confines itself to that thing. Like Fireball can't sue Wizards of the Coast for having a spell called Fireball, right? Because you can't own the term Fireball. But you can own a representation of your company that is utilizing that, right? So it's all wrapped up into a big old knot. Can Wizards lose the trademark to Dungeons and Dragons if it's just used to describe any tabletop RPG? Maybe, but you'd have to use Dungeons and Dragons to define Pathfinder as well, and any other tabletop role-playing game, and I don't know if those IPs want to do that. Or but not them, it wouldn't really be up to them, it'd be up to the community. Alright, so I want to take a look at some of the responses that there have been. But I do want to point this one out. So right here you can see, let me move this up for myself so I can see it a little better. As you can see, this was Wizards' tweet yesterday. Over the past week, we have witnessed an incredible outpour of passion and dedication from our community, working together to protect and cultivate the inclusive environment of Dungeons and Dragons. Please read our update on the open game license. And then this is the picture they used. And somebody pointed out, okay, either a really bad choice to include artwork for an article like this, or this is boomer level cringe from Wizards of the Coast. I've also heard people speculate that this was on purpose and was a cry for help from the D&D Beyond team, because this picture is from a card called Bar the Gate. This is a Wizards, this is a magic card, and Bar the Gate is a counter target creature or planeswalker spell. So this is either insidious, tongue-in-cheek, or someone's cry for help, and it's really, I just thought this person made a really good point. So Caleb, shouting you out, bro. That's really funny. So let's take a look at the actual content of this. So we're back to D&D Beyond, because for whatever reason, Wizards is using D&D Beyond to field all this nonsense instead of using Wizards or the Dungeons and Dragons specific website. They're going through D&D Beyond. I wonder why. Yes, the card is a counterspell. It is not lost on me, and I love everything about this. So, okay, last time we looked at the actual, what they had said back in December. Now we're looking at, this is from a day ago, which would be the 13th of January. So it's been not a month for this update. When we initially, it's like a week out from being a month, I think. Okay. When we initially conceived of revising the OGL, it was with 3 major goals in mind. I don't like one of 2 things of this right out the gate. First off, it doesn't say that wasn't what we were doing. That leak was a mistake. That wasn't what we were doing. No. This information is wrong. It does not start with that. So, noted. When we initially conceived of revising the OGL, it was with 3 major goals in mind. First, we wanted the ability to prevent the use of D&D content from being included in hateful and discriminatory products. To protect the world from devastation. Second, we wanted to address those attempting to use D&D in Web3 blockchain games and NFTs by making clear that OGL content is limited to tabletop role-playing content like campaigns, modules, and supplements. And third, we wanted to ensure the OGL is for the content creator, the home brewer, the aspiring designer, our players, and the community. To unite all peoples within our nation. Not major corporations to use their own commercial and promotional purposes. To denounce the evils of truth and love. I read this and all I could hear was Team Rocket the entire time as they try to steal shit. And there's something in here that Wizards is doing that I don't know if they've noticed that they're doing. If you look at this initial thing, working together to protect and cultivate the inclusive environment of Dungeons and Dragons, you're describing your IP as an environment, as a community thing, as something that is not solely owned by your company, which limits and takes away from your power as a company to control that IP, that trademark. right? So they're describing Dungeons and Dragons as this big culminative community thing that involves all these homebrewers, that involves all this third-party content, and then trying to say, but we own it all. And so they're doing the thing that this is what I mean by they want people to think that they own things they don't own, right? But I digress. They're gonna say, and the thing is this OGL doesn't prevent people from making racist D&D content. Or at least not making racist D20 content that is compatible with Dungeons and Dragons, if you want to be technical about the way we need to start changing our phrasing. Right? Nothing in this OLG does this. Because there's nothing they can do about that. Because they don't own the system. Because you can't own a system. Because that's not how games work. You can't own soccer, FIFA. You don't own the rules to soccer. So, what's a safe way that is also short and easy to type to name the community and common game if you shouldn't use D&D? And I think that's a great question. I think that is probably the best question to be asking, is what direction do we move forward as a community? And again, these are my opinions, right? I'm not gonna think, I just think we should call it blackjack and hookers for all I care. Blungeons and blagons. Dragons and dungeons. Driving these goals were two simple principles. One, our job is to be good stewards of the game. Don't own that part. It is not your job to be stewards of the game, and the fact that you feel entitled to and think you are is a big fucking problem. Bro. No. So I immediately take umbrage with the first thing here. And this is again why I think Dungeons and Dragons, Wizards, Hasbro maybe, whoever it is, wants people to think colloquially that they own shit they do not own. And two, the OGL exists for the benefit of the fans. Nothing about those principles has wavered for a second. You know what would be really good for the fans? If Wizards were to come out and give a clear and concise, we own this, we don't own this. If they went through their books and said, hey, listen, we own this, and here's how this applies, and we don't own this, and here's how this applies, but then they would have to admit what they do not own. And then they would have to be giving the right or giving away the capability of potentially going after someone in the future, frivolous or not. Because again, you can sue somebody for something that you don't think you're going to win to bully them. That was why our early drafts of the new OGL included the provisions it did. So they're saying that the draft that was leaked was accurate as a draft, as it was presented. So no miscommunication or misunderstanding there. This was what they were working on. Now, it may or may not have been completed, and we all acknowledge that. I don't think that's in contention. Right? That draft language was provided to content creators and publishers so their feedback could be considered before anything was finalized. I'm gonna press X to doubt on this one, and you can maybe debate this, and you guys can let me know what you think. There was a piece in that original 1.1 that we saw that was posted by Wizards, not the leaked one, the one that was posted by Wizards, that had this bit in it that said, you need to sign this. So, I'm a little bit skeptical about you saying that this was draft language for feedback. when it had a bit in it about you have to sign off on this. But I think that's up for debate and interpretation. In addition to language allowing us to address discriminatory and hateful conduct and clarifying what types of products the OGL covers, our drafts included royalty language designed to apply to large corporations attempting to use OGL content. It was never our intention to impact the vast majority of the community. Right, but you can hit one small person and use that to set a precedent to go after the big person you're wanting to go off. It's the instability that you created by putting this out there. It's you've missed the point. You've missed the thing that people are worried about. You've missed the mark by a mile. This is not addressing the problems. What you intended to do and what you were planning on doing it with it in the near future is irrelevant for what you are capable of using it for down the line. So we're just supposed to trust that, well, yeah, but we're never going to change this one again, even though you said we weren't going to do that with the last one. And even though we wrote in a provision that says we can change this whenever we want. Can you own a hashtag? Pretty sure the answer is no. Don't think you can I don't think you can copyright hashtag D&D. Don't think that's something you can own. Maybe I'm wrong. You say royalty language was designed to apply to large corporations, but the number was $750,000 in revenue. And you had people at 50,000, or sorry, at 50K reporting to you, requiring that they report to you. Bullshit. I call absolute bullshit. The only real thing that the OGL changed wasn't the access to what you could and could not produce. You've always been everybody out there making content. You've always been legally in the clear to make that content because Wizards doesn't own what they think they do. What you can't do is put Dungeons and Dragons logo and pretend you're official when you're not, which most people didn't do anyway. Very, very few people were putting D&D on their merchandise saying that it was a D&D official. Because most people know that it's not D&D official. That's why it's called homebrew. By calling it homebrew, you've negated that it's official content in its entirety. And so by negating that it's official content in its entirety, you've acknowledged that you are not run by Wizards, you're not associated with Wizards, and you're making content that is compatible. And so you work in the clear with or without even the original OGL. The original OGL was just a way for everybody to kind of work together on like a pretty fair, even playing field. And incidentally give Wizards more power down the line, which they are now exercising or attempting to exercise. And so what happens when you go to the second half and say, well, the royalty language was... This is now the second half of this. What they're adding is, you have to report to us now. Okay, big brother. Well, why? What the fuck do I need to report to you? My revenue. The hell are you gonna do with that information? You want to be a... You're gonna tell me that this wasn't for my benefit? When if I make a living wage off of making content that's compatible with your product that you don't own, but if I sign off on this, not only do I, even if it's compatible or not only do I have to report to you, but I also have to not be official, and you're just allowed to take my shit. Yeah, and RJ makes a good point, keeping in mind that what they're talking about here, they are the mega corporation. That's them. They're the problem. Hello? It's you, you're the problem. Hello? The irony. We need to be good stewards of the game. You don't own the game. Stop pretending you own the game. Wizards doesn't own the game. Wizards only owns their version. God, dear God. Topical makes a good point. To be fair, I think there is a coherent argument to be made about the phrase Dungeons and Dragons homebrew that could cause confusion in market audiences. I think there is, particularly if you're publishing a book. So the requirement would be a change in phrasing. You just take out Dungeons and Dragons homebrew and you say D&D compatible. D&D 5th edition compatible. D&D 6th edition compatible. Right? Like, you're not wrong. Tappy, what did I say? I didn't say tropical this time. What did I say? Topical? Why do I get your name? I'm just gonna call you Weasel. I suck. Can't read. Alright. However, it's clear from the reaction. Was it now? It's clear from the reaction, we rolled a 1. Rolled a 1 on what? Conveying your intentions? You haven't said what you were rolling about. Persuasion? I feel like it might have been persuasion. Because I feel like you want to persuade people that you have more power and more control over something that you don't, and people were not convinced by that. At least I'm not convinced by that. I'm gonna start sending wizards emails that includes the amount of money I make every stream just to annoy them. For no other purpose than to say, I like D&D and maybe my D&D might be close enough. I don't know, I gotta keep myself covered. Here's some information that's completely useless to you and you don't want. Send me to your spam box. Please. Deception check? Yeah, good point, Dapper. Was this a deception check? What were you rolling for, wizards? What were you trying to do? Performance? Dancing monkey? I don't like this. I don't like that the first half of this doesn't tell us what you're saying you failed at. It's clear from the reaction we rolled a 1. Yeah, we talked about Legal Eagles video, and I absolutely recommend watching Legal Eagles video. He's saying everything that I said here, and everything that we talked about 2 days ago during our open hangout. It has become clear that it is no longer possible to fully achieve all 3 goals while staying true to our principles. So here's what we're doing. Why? Because because the shit you have about revenue is bullshit and doesn't protect the community from anything at all, and you can't protect people from making racist D20 tabletop RPG systems that are compatible with yours. You can't stop that. And trying to utilize minorities and trying to fearmonger that the game's gonna be ruined, we have to protect it. We have to protect it, guys. No, you can't protect it. Even if that's what you're saying you're trying to do, everything you're doing is the opposite of that. After the 10th email, quote, MX Chesh, please stop emailing us your revenue. We are not the IRS. Me responding, you're certainly acting as if you were. Yes, that thing. Oh, yes, that thing. Oh my god, So here's what they're gonna do. Alright, cool. So after you've tried to fluff us up and talk about how good your intentions definitely were, and you totally weren't doing anything, and nothing that you were planning on doing was in any way going to bone everybody over as best as possible, as you pretended you owned something you didn't own, here's what they're gonna do. The next OGL, so they're still gonna change it. Cool. Great. The next OGL will contain the provisions that allow us to protect and cultivate the inclusive environment we are trying to build and specify that it covers only content for TTRPGs. You don't own an environment. I don't know how to make this more clear. You don't own an environment. If you start calling D&D an environment, it's just like how you can't own a park. That's not how that works. So if you try to make Dungeons and Dragons into, and I know I'm getting into the weeds of technicalities, there are ways like the government will maintain public space on a park, and like you could have like a private area that is an open field that you could give public access to, but it still remains a private entity. Different thing. We're talking about an environment as in an atmosphere, right? Not a literal park. The atmosphere around your table. And I really don't like being the bearer of bad news, except I absolutely love being the bearer of bad news, and I'm just a dirty fucking liar. You don't own the experience around a table people have when they play your fucking game. And if somebody plays a racist homebrew at home, there's nothing anybody can do about it, and nobody should give a shit. Because it's their fucking home table, and if they want to be racist assholes, no, well, let them. They're in their own fucking mom's basement, neckbeardy bullshit. You don't have to play with them. And they don't necessarily get to play with you. And that is on an individual basis to decide. Wizards does not get to tell you you're not allowed to be racist. That's not their job. They don't own that. You don't own being racist, Wizards. You don't own picking and choosing what does and does not count as being racist or as being discriminatory, yada, 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 yada. This is not on you. This is not your job. Oh my fucking god. Bro. I'm asking chat. I'm gonna make a poll here. I'm gonna start a poll and say, do you want a do you want, let's just call it Wizards. Do you want Wizards to control public social standards of acceptability? Because that's what they're doing. So like, let's say that once upon a time, back in the day, it was socially acceptable for people to be discriminated based on the color of their skin, right? There was something called segregation, and segregation existed. Now, do you want a corporation to dictate to you that you had to be segregated? You have to keep these things separated. You're not allowed to let black people play at your game. Because otherwise it's going to hurt the integrity of the game. They have to protect that. They're the keepers. They've got to be responsible keepers, right? So what happens when social segregation changed? What happens when social standards change and make one thing more accessible than another? For example, the difference between using the word species and using the word race in the books. Right? Are they going to say that if you continue to use race, it's unacceptable and discriminatory? And Wizards is going to dictate that, and they're going to go after you for it? Well, I mean, they're the ones who are trying to this is policing. I don't know what to tell you. This is literally policing of whatever game you're putting out there. So if I make a D&D game, or I make a tabletop RPG that is compatible with D&D, and I want to use D&D official licensing, and I continue to use the term race, because I don't think using the term race is racist, and maybe it is problematic, maybe it's not. This is hypothetical. Do they come after me for my game and say I can't publish it? Because they don't like my terminology, even though my terminology is, in this situation that I'm proposing, the hypothetical, is harming nobody? It's not even harming their brand? Or does that mean that anybody who is making TTRPGs has to fall in line with whatever Wizards is pushing at the time, whether you agree with them or not? Like alignment, for example. Some people think alignment is really fucking problematic. Some people don't. Is there a morality around whether or not you use alignments? Are you a bad person if you make a race in your world the bad guys, like the Beholders, or the Illithids, or the Flumphs, or the Gnomes, and just be like, they're evil in my world because it makes sense for whatever I'm playing? Are you a bad person for playing in that game? And is Wizards gonna be like, you can't publish your game now? What? What? And we want a really good example. Drow, for a very long time, have been evil and published by Wizards. Flumphs are good aligned, lawful good aligned creatures that engage in discriminatory practices that it is based on color and magical and intellect prowess. And so if you're not smart enough and you are something called a common flumph, you get kicked out of flumph society because you're not a cleric. Therefore, they also discriminate based on religious affiliation and religious capabilities. I had a question. Are Drow evil because of the color of their skin? Or are Drow evil because of their affiliation with Lolth? Anyway, this is a conversation for a different time. I'm getting distracted. I do enjoy talking about alignment. I have a whole script based around that. I mean, instead of Drow, let's say goblins, because goblins are green. The overtones of a dark-skinned group of evil people is kind of big old yikes, and we don't really like that. And I agree with that. I think that's problematic. But I also don't ascribe to that the Drow have to be black, for lack of a better term. If I go, goblins are evil because they were created by Gromsh, and Gromsh is evil, and they are inclined by nature to lack the freedom to make moral decisions, so they're not capable of deciding to be any other way except for a handful of outliers. What happens? Right? See, just don't give goblins a few sticks of dynamite. Why? Because they're goblins? That's racist. Anyway, Wizards is attempting to take on a role that is not their responsibility. It's our responsibility as a community to integrate what we agree is acceptable and not acceptable when it comes to terminology, when it comes to alignment, when it comes to racism, when it comes to how we as a community want to deal with these things, right? Whereas if I have racist undertones or overtones, not everybody's going to want to play in that game, and that might not be a game that I want to put out to the public, because that's my home game for funsies, right? If nobody's getting hurt, then there's not really any problem, because everybody at the table is consenting, and that's the thing. Not everybody in the public is consenting, right? And so it's not on me to enforce that. And if I publish something and people are like, hey, wow, these Hadozi are pretty fucking problematic and pretty fucking racist, maybe don't have that. Yes, the people who made the Hadozi and made them the way they did and presented them the way they did are the ones that are going to protect us. This is exactly what I mean when I did that throwback to segregation. We need wizards to protect us from people making racist content. Wizards makes racist content. What do you mean? It took the community telling them to fucking stop and don't do that for that to get fixed. Yeah, let's leave it up to the corporation. That's their job to make money, not to be fucking moral police about thought crime. That means that other expressions such as educational and charitable campaigns, live streams, cosplay, VTT uses, etc. will remain unaffected by any OGL update. You don't know that. The OGL wasn't supposed to be updated in the first place, and yet here you are updating it. So this is bunk. Content already released under 1.0a will also remain unaffected. And again, you've maintained the right to change this at any point in time, so I'm going to go with you. And again, to be clear, I'm not saying these conversations about morality should or should not be changed because, again, this is a conversation for a different time. I'm not going to justify whether or not it's right to have the drow being good or bad or evil or not evil, yada, 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 with the alignment system, etc., etc., etc. I'm saying that it's not on wizards to make that decision. And it shouldn't be on wizards to make that decision. It's on the community to make those decisions. What will not contain is any royalty structure. It will also not include the license back provision that some people were afraid was a means for us to steal work. That thought never crossed our minds. I'm going to ask for X in the chat to doubt. Are prostitutes acceptable? If it's consenting. Under any new OGL, you will own the content you create. You already did. And this is what I mean. And this is what I mean when I say, even in the way this is phrased and the language that is being used here, Wizards is pretending that they own shit they don't. Your work is going to be protected under the new OGL. Or, under any new OGL, you will own the content you create. With or without the OGL, you own the content you created. Period. End of sentence. With the new OGL, with the old OGL, with any OGL in the future, whether you sign or not, because there are legalities to whether or not a contract that you sign is even valid or not in the first place. Period. There are things that are going to be protected anyway, because Wizards doesn't own it in the first place. They're pretending that they're protecting you from something that they could do in the future that they have no right to do. Again, all it takes is a slight tweak of, you call it D&D compatible, instead of calling it D&D homebrew, or calling it just homebrew. Don't use the wizard imagery. Like, don't use their logo. Don't use their shit to promote your shit, except for saying, hey, this is Dungeons & Dragons compatible. You can do that, and they can't stop you worth a shit. So the stuff that you owned, you still own and already owned, unless you are one of the handful of people, and I don't mean to say a handful of people to say that there's not a lot of you, unless you're one of the people who has a signed legal agreement that you have worked out and negotiated as individuals or as an individual company with Wizards, there's only so much they can own, and it is sure as hell not the system. You might, again, be able to say, hey, they own the rights to make, like, if you make a monster and you utilize their layouts, maybe. You might be in that gray area there to say, well, you're using their artistic expression of these rules, therefore we can go at you. But if you're just using the rules and you create your own art and you tweak your layout, you'll be in the clear. These monsters can be used and are compatible with any D20 system, including Dungeons & Dragons. You're welcome. I solved your problem. That thought never crossed our mind. Under any MGL, your own content you create, we won't. Yes, I definitely take your word that you won't steal my shit. Thank you. I believe you. Any language we put down will be crystal clear and unequivocal on that point. Really? Because the language you put down before that you said you worked on and were looking for feedback on sure didn't, sure wasn't. On the other hand, when they mentioned up here that they were looking for feedback, the fact that it took them like a month, just under a month, to come out with this, maybe you weren't really looking for feedback. I don't believe you. I think are we gonna get a citation needed? The license back language was intended to protect us and our partners from creators who incorrectly allege that we steal their work simply because of coincidental similarities. I really hope everybody has saved a copy of this and it stays in the Wayback Machine, because this wording right here can be applied back to them. So if they try to sue somebody to say that, well, you're using our property, our trademark, our copyright, and you say, oh, you're just suing me over similarities. I would love to see that. I would love to see this piece of paper make it back into the make it into court. As we continue to invest in the game that we love and move forward with partnerships in film, television, and digital games, that risk is simply too great to ignore. That somebody's gonna steal your shit that you don't own, and you're trying to pretend that you own. I would like to point out Knights of the Old Republic uses like the third edition, 3.5, like what's it? Not setting standard. It uses that setup, right? It uses that. I lost the word. Brain. System. There you go. It uses that system. And one of the reasons Knights of the Old Republic is so good and so fun, and why 3.5 got so bogged down, was because 3.5 you had to do all the math yourself. In KOTOR did all the math for you in the background, so it stayed fun. You didn't have to get bogged down by math because the computer did it. Right? Wizards can't go after KOTOR because KOTOR used the system, because the system is open. Anybody can use the system. And so that was a game. You can have a fantasy television series. You can have Critical Role and Dimension 20 still doing their stuff because it operates in its own world entirely that just happens to be coincidentally compatible using a rule set that is open, that functions with Dungeons and Dragons. Ooh, you have a version pointing out the real-time edits they made after they published it if you want. It was on Reddit and I saved it locally just in case. RJ, you're my hero. That's amazing. The new OGL will contain provisions to address that risk, but we will do it without a license back and without suggesting we have rights to the content you create. Thanks for doing the bare bones basic minimum you should have been doing in the first place. Oh, was it second edition? Thank you for the correction. If it was second, I can't remember which system it was, which edition it was utilizing, but at the end of the day, it wasn't an edition owned by, because it was a system. You can't own a system. Your ideas and imagination are what make this game special, and that belongs to you. No! The game belongs to everyone. Oh my fucking god. The entitlement. At what point does this come Wizards is literally just trying to lie to people? At what point is this becoming Wizards is lying to you, the video? Right? Because this is kind of what this is turning into. They don't own the game. They own the version of the game, like a skin of the game is the best way to put it. They own this stylization of the game. I'm going back to Uno. Uno is a pack of cards. You can play Uno with a standard pack of cards. Anybody can play Uno or make Uno with a regular standard deck of cards or make a version of Uno using a different style of card. They just can't call it Uno. Because Uno is the trademark. You just have to call it something the fuck else. Or if you want to buy Uno, you just fucking buy Uno. Ah! People don't just own their ideas and imaginations, although we obviously all needed your fucking input on, give us permission for that. The game doesn't belong to Wizards. They only own the skins. They own the fluff that they made. And everybody can just make their own fluff. Remember when they changed mages to wizards? Then they got rid of mage throughout the books? Made for some really funny typos? Yeah, just call wizards mages. The setting, yeah, the fluff, the setting, the skin. So, like, Forgotten Realms belongs to wizards. Dark Sun. Shit like that. That's wizards. You know what they don't own? A fantasy realm known by any other name. A couple of last thoughts. First, we won't be able to release the new OGL today. Yeah, no shit. Because we need to make sure we get it right, but it is coming. Second, you're going to hear people say that they won. And we lost because making your voices heard focused us to change our plans. Well, I mean, I guess at least they're admitting that they... Who wrote this? I'm going to assume that the person and PR team that they got to write this did their best with what pile of garbage they were presented that they had to say. And I'm gonna bless these people and say that they've probably, like, I can only imagine what horrific bunch of nonsense that they were told that they had to put out in the community in a palatable manner. Because if this kind of shit is slipping through, then it means whatever they were given was really, really, really bad. Like, really bad. I play soccer. When I score a goal, can FIFA sue me? Yeah, right. Those people will only be half right. They won, and so did we. What? What a... I feel like I'm getting flashbacks of something, and I can't remember what it was. This happened in the past year, and I can't think of who said it. Who was it? Oh my god, people, help me. What was this? There was... You're gonna hear people say they won. Those people will only be half right. They won, and so did we. Oh my god, what was it? Fuck. I can't remember. There was somebody used this type of phrasing, and I was just like, why would you say this? What absolute nonsense would you say? Hello there. Oh, God. But so did we. Oh, God, I wish I could remember what it was. I really wish I could remember what it was. Ugh. Rip my brain. Okay. What? Did somebody tell me to check Twitter? I think I saw somebody told me to check Twitter. I am looking at Twitter. Oh, thank you. You have sent me the edits. I've been blessed. I've been blessed this day. Thank you. Leave me alone. Okay. There we go. Let me just throw this in here. Oh, God. Could you stop being a weenie for like 30 seconds? There we go. Okay. So this is the edits that they've changed. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look at that. After we're done looking at it. So, okay. This is really stupid language and real bad language. It's trying to set up... I mean, anybody who's watched my channel before will recognize this and understand that this is language to try and set up anybody who's been disagreeing or anybody who's been calling it out as, like, the bad guy or dishonest or yada yada yada. Yeah. A couple of last thoughts. First, we won't be able to release blah blah blah. Okay. Our plan was always to solicit the input of our community before any updates to the OGL. I don't believe you. If that was your intention, then you would have responded far more quickly. You would have been like on that. You would have, as soon as those, you communicated at the beginning, right, in December, and then a little bit more came out in the background and you didn't respond. You didn't immediately, because you could have immediately been like, oh, yeah, no, this is just a work in progress. We were going to release it to everybody later once we had ironed out some of the kinks. Some of those numbers have just been plugged in as spitballs just to be placeholders, and we're still working on crunching numbers and figuring out what we're doing. And here's what we are actually working on, since we were going to tell you and ask you anyway. We'll let you know when our edits, da-da-da. Easy. Bum. Boom. Hands wiped. Everybody would have been like, oh, okay, whatever. Sure, moving on. Or some people still would have been upset, reasonably so. But the drafts you've seen were attempts to do just that. No, they weren't. We want to always delight fans and create experiences together that you don't own, that everyone loves. Unless you're a Nazi, which I agree with, to be fair. Unless we deem you as discriminatory, which is, again, it should not be up to a corporation, should absolutely be up to the communities. And even then, sometimes you gotta have conversations with communities that are like, segregation is okay, and it's like, no, because there once upon a time was a society and a community that thought that was okay. So there's always going to be things in a community or in a society that is not okay and is going to be discriminatory in one way or another. And then you've got things that discrimination has to exist in some capacity, otherwise you run into the paradox of tolerance, and when you run into the paradox of tolerance, suddenly there's Nazis everywhere. Whoops. A conversation for another day. We want to always delight fan, blah, blah, blah. We realize we did not do that this time, and we are sorry for that. Oh. Who are you? We're sorry you guys found out and think we're assholes now. Our goal was to get exactly the type of feedback on which provisions worked and which did not. Which we ultimately got from you. Except we're still not changing a lot of the shit that you have problems with. Any change this major could only have been done well if we were willing to take feedback. Oh! The heroes! We never could make these kinds of changes if we were willing to take feedback. Oh. Alan asks, 5e is the rule set, D&D is the IP. Yes. That is a good way to put it. No matter how it was provided, so we are. Shut up. Thank you for caring enough to let us know what works and what doesn't, what you need and what scares you. Without knowing that, we can't do our part to make the new OGL match our principles. Everyone was telling you to not change the OGL and just leave it the fuck alone. You saying, well, we're gonna change some shit, is not you listening and complying and taking feedback. That's you trying to pacify and negotiate on something people are not willing nor desire to negotiate on in the first place. I would like to point out that Pathfinder's ORC is called ORC, which spells orc, and I kind of like that. That's nice marketing. Like, that's nice. I like that. Yeah, Dark Sun had a lot of all that slavery stuff. What happened to mature audiences? That's actually a really good point. Is it wrong to have slavery in your fantasy game and explore slavery even if you are the good guys or even if you are the bad guys, right? Again, sorry, I want to have a conversation about this on a later date because I do not want, like, what the fuck the OLG is doing to get bogged down by, like, the morality of whether or not something is okay in a game. Because that's, like, this is a different, and then whether or not, it's a complicated conversation that I think deserves its own space to talk about. So you make a decent point, and I think we can talk about that in the future. And then talking about what's okay in a game and what is okay in a community sense of that game, right? Because those are different things. Anyway, Finally, we'd appreciate the chance to make this right. But what you've presented doesn't make it right. You're starting off on the wrong foot. We love D&D's devoted players and the creators who take them on so many incredible adventures, which you don't own. We won't let you down. Too late. So let's take a look, real quick look here. Here's the changes. Let me open. Can I open this specific? Okay, there we go. So we got some of this. Here we have the changes where it says when we initially conceived of revising the OGL, what used to be when we started to consider. They changed that. First, we wanted to enhance our ability to prevent. We wanted the ability to prevent. Hateful and discriminatory content. They changed content to products. They changed content to products or products to content? Let me double check. Yeah, products. Changed to products. NFTs by making clear that the OGL content is limited. Modules. We wanted to clarify to ensure. Yeah, some of the changes in here are like, this is language changing. So they're trying to make their draft or what they had initially said come off a lot better and a lot less oppressive. Like, some of the languages here is like, we're doing this or we want to do this, right? Yikes. How it's clear from community reaction, from the reaction. So they're separating out that it's the community that's saying this to just a general reaction, right? They're trying to they're trying to take out like the personalized language of understanding that they're being like attacked by legitimate criticism by a large number of people that are dedicated people, to try to separate that out and paint people as bad actors if they're what's the word I'm looking for? If they're critical. Here's a link to that in case anybody's interested. Props to picking that up while it was getting changed. I appreciate that kind of stuff. That's amazing because I read the original. When I first read it yesterday, and then now there's the changes, and they're subtle. They're subtle changes. It is no longer possible to achieve these 3 goals. Acknowledging that it was impossible in the first place, but now it's no longer probable. I removed all of my Dungeons and Dragons content from my wish list. I also changed the names in my Discord from like Dungeons and Dragons and DM's Place to what did I change it to? Actually, let me look, because I'm pretty sure I changed it to something stupid. Hold on, it's loading. It's loading. I changed it to Blackjack and Hookers. So I've already made the switch over. Y'all are falling behind. Changed Gelatinous Cube to Gelatinous 3. Right? There's also Critical Role giving what they were capable of giving us. So they said, from all of us at Critical Role has always supported creators and game development in the tabletop space. We stand by our industry peers, as well as anyone who takes a risk creating a new system or developing an original idea. The beauty of gaming comes from the opportunity to share inclusive, diverse, and compelling stories from a wide spectrum of creators. That's exactly why we launched our own game publishing company a few years ago. Because we believe that broadening the field of creators boosts the entire industry. A rising tide raises all ships style of approach to business. The success we have experienced is thanks to the person and interest of the greater tabletop community, and we commit to fostering an environment that allows everyone the opportunity to easily share the stories they wish to tell. Critical Role. Now, this is kind of a big deal in that, because people have been asking for Critical Role to say something, and the answer is like they're under legal obligations. There is only so much they can say or do. So what happens? What happens to things like if Critical Role comes out with a game, will they involve an OGL? If Pathfinder comes out with their OGL, do you need an OGL in the first place? And I'm going to argue that you didn't need the OGL in the first place. You didn't need it. The only thing the OGL applies to is whether or not you're going to use someone else's branding. And realistically, it's risky to use somebody else's branding anyway. Change your wording, keep your game, keep doing whatever it was you were doing, and just make some slight adaptations to keep yourself safe. The D20 system was always free. The system in 5th edition, it's always free. And I think the conversation that the community needs to start having isn't necessarily about making your own system and isn't necessarily about trying to change the system that everybody's using. The conversation or like everybody deviating. I think what needs to happen from a community standpoint is I think that everybody should start having a discussion about and force Wizards to have this discussion, because there's no way they're going to let this conversation happen without their input. What does Wizards own, and what is their IP, and what is the system? If you can establish with Wizards what is their system and what is not their system, and what they need to stick their nose out of like a fucking corporation has no business fucking being a part of, besides towing the line of what the community tells them, they will have to comply. And they will have to start bringing forward that information a little bit more clearly on their end, or they're going to shut the fuck up. Right? And so now you start having a conversation about, okay, so we're just not going to call what we're doing D&D anymore. We're going to call it something else, or we're going to play this person's system, which uses the D20 system. Just stop saying we're playing D&D. Just say we're playing D20. You don't need new systems. You just need to rephrase what you're doing. And hopefully you'll support people who are making new systems, because new systems are great. They're fun. They're a good time. Do that. But you don't need to abandon the D20 system. And you don't need to abandon 5th edition system, because Wizards doesn't own the 5th edition system. They only own the thematics. They only own the fluff. They only own the skin that it's wearing. Just call it D20. What are you playing? D20. Which version? This, that, or the other thing? Do I intend to watch the movie? Not gonna lie, I still really want to fly to California and go see the movie with Trevor. I would love that. But there's other things we can do. Vagri makes a good point. Wizards of the Coast is never going to have that conversation. Wizards of the Coast is going to have that conversation if everybody is saying, well, you don't own this. And they're going to try to make it clear what they do own. Or, again, like I said, they're going to shut the fuck up. And they're going to try and keep what they do own as quiet as possible. Unfortunately, that shit is public information, so it's just going to take more people having the conversation to dig through and peel back that banana peel and find out what the hell is and is not the case. And Dapper makes a good point too. Wizards of the Coast trying to block NFTs is BS. Hasbro is selling NFTs right now. Yup. Hasbro's been selling NFTs, so them trying to block other people from making NFTs is just trying to corner a market. Everything about this OGL is trying to present themselves as if they own something they don't own, make you think that they own something they don't own, and trying to bully out competition. And trying to make themselves something that they're justified in going to and threaten you with when it comes to the legal sentiment. And it's just not something they own in the first place. 5e compatible D20 game. Absolutely. Once you buy those books, you're allowed to make whatever the fuck you want at home, especially at home. But if you want to talk about people making dice, simple, you're just making a set of dice. You just say, here's a D20 dice set. So instead of looking for that D and D, everybody just needs to start looking for a D20 dice set. And it's just a matter of the community making that language changeover. I want to point out that in researching some of this, and looking into what works and what doesn't, and what people can look at, and what the original OGL was based off of. The original OGL was based off of this. This is like Electronics Freedom Foundation stuff. This is free software. And so, yeah, gaming dice set. Yep. This is basically an entire group that their goal is to make things open source and as open source as possible, right? And so this is what I think Pathfinder needs to move into. This is what I think 5th edition needs to move into, or Wizards needs to move into. If Wizards wants to fix the big old hole they dug themselves into, and it's going to be a long time before they dig themselves out of that one, assuming they survive or don't get bought and sold by someone else. I have no dislike towards Pathfinder and Paizo. However, there is literally nothing stopping Paizo in the future doing the exact same things Wizard does, no matter how they present the ORC. Because it's still open source and they still need to protect their IP. Again, what Wizards is doing and what Wizards is presenting with this OGL is nothing new. It's all standard. The reason it's overreaching is because, 1, they set a precedent, and 2, because they're trying to pretend they own shit that they don't. That's what's so outrageous about it. Rolled a 1 on their vibe check. Yeah, it was a vibe check. Have I checked the CNBC article? I have not read the CNBC article yet. I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm looking forward to seeing what else goes on with this, because it's been an absolute shit show. Before we look at wrapping up, and I think we've covered this in a pretty solid amount of time. I do want to talk to. I want you guys to send me, like, if there's any questions or any concerns or anything that you've thought of or you want me to talk about real quick in regards to who this affects or anything like that. Before we move on, because, like, this is. I really hope the community takes away from this what I want the community to take away from this, and it's that understand what Wizards does and doesn't own, because understanding what Wizards does and doesn't own is going to give you the freedom to make whatever you were already making in the first place. It's just going to need maybe a slight tweak. If you have a stream that you've started, you can keep using all those rules. You can make your characters using Wizards books in the background if you want. Maybe don't buy new books, or maybe do buy new books, because the OLG is almost entirely fucking meaningless. What's the impact on the Weasel community? I imagine Weasels are gonna do what Weasels do, and they're gonna, like, be absolute goobers. Weasels are adorable, by the way. Like, marmots, that whole, like, weasel... I want to call them weaselkin, but I know that's not the technical term. They're called, like, muskrats or something like that. Love weasels. CNBC and The Street as well. A decent amount of finance publication have picked up the story. Both of these I mentioned are thorough and well written. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I'll definitely go and check them out. Muscalids. Thank you. Muscalids. Muskrats is way cuter. Can we call them muskrats instead? I am going to petition all of biology to reframe muscalids as muskrats. There's a project to make public domain version of the SRD. The thing is that there's kind of the SRD is kind of already public domain. If you can send me a link to that, Alan, that sounds amazing, because a lot of the SRD is not something they can legally copyright anyway. So if there is a public domain version, please, please, please send that to me. I would love to read that when it comes to fruition. This is not how taxonomy works. I'm gonna make Dapper cry. Muscalade. Okay. Ferrets and stoats can be fun. Yeah, now, is ferret... I don't know if ferret is an umbrella term for a bunch of different, like, loosely defined creatures, or if ferrets are like the SRD is copyrighted. What am I thinking of then? Which is the thing I'm thinking of that isn't? Because I thought the SRD was just like a rule description. Wait, I have books. I can just look. Hold on. I think I just misremembered the SRD as something as the description of the system, but I'm probably incorrect about that. Thank you for correcting me. Where's the SRD? Is it in the back? That's the appendix. I have one of those. Where the hell is the SRD? Or SRD? Oh, the language. Sorry. Okay, yes. Yes. Alright, Deborah, yeah. We're saying the same thing. Yeah, the way it's worded, like the presentation of the SRD would be copyrighted, but the content of like what is fluff versus what is rules, the rules are not copyrighted. So yeah, an open source or a public domain variation of that language would be awesome. I am here for that. You give me more of that. Give me the Roll20 system, public domain, like written via public domain. Give me the 5th edition version of 5th edition that would be the public domain version of the rules as written. Please give me that. Yes, that thing. More of that. I want that. Give me more of that. And I would like to encourage the community to, like the D&D community, to make a push for anybody who's making a new system to make it all open source and make it all public domain available, like something like Uno, right? Own the title of your game, but make it clear what is your IP and what is the game. The D20 community. Yes. The D2C, D20C. Yes. Yes. More of that. I want all of that. But yeah, the verbiage, you can copyright verbiage. It's like the dictionary. Anyone can write a dictionary, but you can't just copy Merriam-Webster. Yes. The words are free, but the format is not necessarily. You could reformat the dictionary, and that would be fun. Maybe like a word sorted by common usage instead of alphabetically. Or words grouped by synonyms. They put traps in maps? What's the traps in maps? I want to know the traps in maps. Please tell me about the traps in maps. Hold on, I got my DMG open. I'm gonna look at the map. I want to see what the trap was. What's the trap? I'm looking at it here. What's the trap? I need to know this. This is valuable information to me. I mean, maybe the tokens, they would be able to, like, the tokens on this would be copyrightable, because that would be like stylization that you'd be able to copyright. And maybe the style of the compass rose, like this demi-lich token over here, that you'd be able to copyright. But you can't copyright rooms underground. Oh, fake towns on real maps. Yeah. Oh, in Google Maps. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant in D&D. Okay. Okay. I wanted to... Now, I'm kind of sad, because I wanted to decorate my background with some of these really cool maps. Like... This is the cool Wildemount map. And I wanted to put it on my wall. But I don't want D&D shit on my walls anymore, at least not in the background of my streams. I also wanted to do some streams doing the cooking of the Heroes Faced D&D cookbook, but I don't get to do that as a stream anymore either. Oh man. Maybe I'll cook it and call it something else and just show it to you guys. We'll do that instead. I'm working on getting myself some new stuff set up so that way we can do a little bit more of that. But whatever, that's a work in progress. That is a work in progress. Change the recipe slightly. The thing is you can't own a recipe. You can only own like the way it's. So a cookbook is actually a really good example. So you can't own scrambled eggs, but you can own the verbiage and the way it's explained and the picture of the scrambled eggs that you present in your cookbook. But you can't own fucking scrambled eggs, nor the method of making scrambled eggs. So you wouldn't be able to copyright scrambled eggs. Landon said if the D20 community can make organizations such as without a crystal ball. Fuck. I haven't escaped yet. I'm trapped. Help. I'm trapped in a glass case of emotion. Fuck me. If the D20 community can make organizations like Wizards of the Coast irrelevant to the community's enjoyment of the name and irrelevant to other D20 content creators / artists, then the entire kerfuffle was worthwhile. Yes, I agree with Landon here. I absolutely agree with Landon here. I think that you can keep supporting the creators you've been supporting, whether they still make D&D content. And I would encourage that those people start to shift away, because it's going to be a process. And I'd like to see this process hurt as little people as possible. Except for Wizards, fuck them. But things like negative to charisma. There's no reason to stop supporting these guys, because they're not, what they're doing is playing a Roll20 game. Now, I might encourage or would like to see them change the way they name things. Put some art on your walls, like painting, like my own art. I should do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to support these creators, because they haven't done anything wrong. They're just using a system by a company who's shitty. And you can support them without giving money to that company. And what I would encourage you to do is support those people through this transition period and say, hey, can you stop using D&D as your verbiage? Because what they're presenting, whatever system they use in the background, Negative to Charisma has their own rules, or has their own homebrew rules. They have their own way they do their races. They have their own world that they're playing in. They don't need Dungeons and Dragons. They don't need wizards, right? They're just using the Roll20 system. So I would just encourage everybody to change their verbiage and stop using D&D as the catch-all descriptor for a TTRPG. Just start saying the Roll20 system or the Roll20 community, and there you go. Problem fucking solved. Done. You don't have to worry about Wizards anymore, because what Wizards puts out is only going to be as beneficial as you want it to be to your game. If they put something out that's like, hey, this is actually really useful, yoink! The same way if you're reading a book and you're like, hey, this style of this monster, or the description of this creature is really cool. Yoink! I'm gonna let my team fight it. Yoink! And then you just give it a different name because you don't want them to recognize it anyway. I want somebody to come out with a version of the monster manual that has everything named with human names, like regular people names. So the beholders are called like Frank, and like a swarm of rats is called Jesse, so you're getting attacked by a swarm of Jessies. I just think that'd be really fucking funny. And then just tweak the stat layout so it's not something that could be like identified as like the artistic trademark of Wizards and whatever, and just do that. It'd be super funny. So instead of everybody sitting around your table and being like, oh shit, it's a Displacer Beast, They go, "Ah, shit, it's Jerry. Fuck." You see what I mean? Like, it'd be super duper fun. Like, it doesn't change at the end of the day. The irony being of where would D&D be without Lord of the Rings? I mean, the same kind of copyright problems exist around fucking Disney. Like, they can't own The Little Mermaid. They can only own a certain degree of it because they take shit that's public domain and make a rendition of it and then bully everybody else from being able to make that kind of product. Right? So, like, why? RJ says, decided to look into my local Pathfinder 2E community, which I generally avoid because they play in Italian, and seems like the local distributor is now officially releasing a localized PDFs of the manual. Oh, there you go. Very cool. Sorry, I said I assumed Pathfinder, but that is P2E, and I'm not sure if that's that could be Paranoia. I'm not 100% sure. Seems like the game is exploding here now. I do want to be careful that I don't think it's a good idea for the community to move from Wizards to Paizo. Not because I have anything against Paizo, but because if you replace one corporation with another corporation, you haven't really solved the problem. You've just band-aided it. Oh, it was Pathfinder's correct. You've just band-aided it. If Paizo really, really did want to help people, and really, really did want to move things in a direction, which they seem that they want to do, please give us the rules in a in an open format, in a public domain format. Find individual D20 content creators and support them if you like their content. Click whatever passes for the like button, buy their stuff if you like it, buy them wishlist stuff in Patreon. Yes, you can support individuals without supporting Wizards. So if there's like a tabletop RPG using the Roll20 system, do not assume that they are just ignoring Wizards bullshittery. They're working with the tools that they have and talk to and reach out in positive ways, not in toxic ways. Don't be a dick and be like, "Hey, I'd love to see you guys switch from this to this." The only thing that I do not like right now that's going to have to be changed, and I think we can probably reach out to Twitch to make that change, is the bottom of Twitch does have Dungeons & Dragons as the game that people are playing. And that's a gray area. And we'll see what happens with that, or what could happen with that in the future, but it'd be better off to just avoid it and just say, have TTRPG, or D20, or another name for that category on Twitch would, I think, be greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. And so I'd like to see that get changed, but all that's really going to take is enough TTRPG creators able to use that tag, or reaching out to change that tag. Buy Oops All Clerics directly from Maddie. Yeah, instead of buying it off of whatever, I forget which site she was using. So if you know a creator that you used to follow on D&D Beyond and they're no longer able to post on D&D Beyond, follow the creator directly. Then you don't have to go through fucking Wizards to get their shit. Okay. I'm going to wrap it up here. We are at the 2-hour mark. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Like and share and stuff. Please, if you agree with me, please have conversations about this. You don't have to share my long-ass ranty nonsense for you to have conversations about what direction the community can move into. Or hey, snip out the part that you liked about what I said and pass that to somebody and say, hey, look at what this person said. This person's doing shit. Go do what that person said. I'm off to go work on some secret projects that may or may not have come about because this dumb shit of Wizards is doing. And if you feel like supporting me, links are in the description down below, as well as liking and sharing and all that shit is great. If you're a member, thank you so much for supporting and being a member throughout this. I am away tomorrow because I have other shit to do, and I don't stream on Sundays yet. That's coming. Maybe. We'll see. And Monday is my day off. So I will be back on Tuesday to talk about some other nonsense bullshit. You want to see me wear a backwards baseball cap? I do have one. On Tuesday, I will try to remember to wear a baseball cap. And if I've forgotten, yell at me and I'll go get it because it's actually right over there. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for supporting. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Weasel and Weasel. I greatly appreciate it. Have a good day, everybody. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.